Hello and welcome to the Nexus. For the first time, we're taking a second look at a big name. Donald Trump is back in our spotlight as he celebrates 1 year in office. And what a year. We're going to be looking at Trump's wars and skirmishes with journalists, women, ethnic minorities, and well, you name it. We're also looking at fire and fury. What does the book tell us about the president's state of mind? We'll ask a psychologist who says he's losing sleep over it. And the calls to impeach Trump. Will this anniversary be his last? There's more than one way to remove a president, you know. All that ahead here in the Nexus. Hello, I'm Matthew Moore, and today in the Nexus it is time to take stock. We've now had a year of the Donald in the White House, and we are seeking professional help. We are joined by Dr. John Gartner. He thinks that the president is losing his mental grip and has written an open letter to Trump's doctor demanding a mental health check. To balance things out, we are joined by Mica Mosbacher. She's met Trump several times, campaigned for him, and last but not least, John Gizzi, the man who knows everyone in Washington and has been covering that capital city for decades. So now we're all gathered. It's time to grab your popcorn and watch the first episode of Trump Wars.
Good morning, Washington. It's 11 a.m. and it's shaping up to be a beautiful day. We're headed for an unseasonable high of 87, but make sure you get out there and enjoy it, as it's not set to last. Now, here's Sally Johnson.
So help me God.
You want to make America great again. We are going to make America great again.
Can you give us a question?
Don't be
You're
rude.
attacking us. Can you give us a question?
Don't be rude.
Can you
No, I'm
give
not
us a
going to give you a
question?
question. I'm not going to give you a
Can you
question.
can you stay categorical?
You are fake news.
Fake. Fake.
You're fake news. Fake news.
It's all fake news.
I noticed Chuck showed me yesterday with fake tears.
This executive order was mean-spirited and un-American.
You see it at the airport, you see it all over. It's working out very nicely.
President Trump's actions are discriminatory and put us all at risk.
You had a group on one side that was bad, and you had a group on the other side that was also very violent.
Wouldn't you love to see one of these NFL owners, when somebody disrespects our flag, to say, get that son of a off the field right now, out, he's fired. He's fired!
Donald Trump pulled Donald Trump out of the Paris Agreement, so don't worry about any of that.
Our withdrawal from the agreement represents a reassertion of America's sovereignty. It is time to officially recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. So today we call for calm, for moderation, and for the voices of tolerance.
Amerika'nın kılıç kanadı. Orta Doğu'nun kucağına atılmış yeni bir bomba.
Believe me, not good.
Believe me.
Believe me.
Believe me. Believe me. Believe me. Believe me.
Terrific.
Well, whoever walked into the White House would have had the usual problems to inherit: ISIS, Afghanistan, Iraq, and so on. But we've left those out of the report. Those were all Donald Trump-specific little fights. Mica, if I can come to you first of all, why does Donald Trump pick so many fights?
He's provocative, he uses tough language, and he gets his point across, especially in tweeting. He is authentic, he's a straight shooter. What you see is what you get.
Okay, fair enough. Now, we're going to go through some of those issues individually. Let's start with the press, and no one better to ask this question of than John Gizzi. You've been covering Washington for decades. How is it different being a journalist now that Trump's in charge?
The fact is that it is as different as night and day when you look at Trump in the press room or you look at his press spokesman and compare it to every other example in modern times, certainly in my career, of presidents and their spokesmen dealing with the press. I would call him sui generis, one of a kind.
But you look at his approval ratings, he's getting killed. Around about, what do we got here, 37%. You compare that to previous presidents in their first year, he's really low down. Let's face it, John, he is alienating vast swathes of your profession.
Well, the fact is that many in the Fourth Estate, the profession of reporters, are a little taken aback by this White House, by the language, by the style sometimes of the president and his spokesman, privately referred to as beat the press. On the other hand, the same people who will publicly complain about that are delighted with the accessibility of the White House, the leaks that are there. I know I benefited from one particular leaker until he was let go fairly early in the administration. And the fact is that we know just from the daily news that a lot seeps out of the White House in total contrast to the Obama White House, which was as wound up as a drum.
Okay. John Gizzi, thank you very much. John Gartner, we're going to hop over to you just briefly. Why do you think it is that he picks so many fights?
Well, it's related to his personality disorder. He suffers from malignant narcissism, which was a diagnosis that was introduced by Erich Fromm, who escaped the Nazis. It's the most severe personality disorder that you can have. It makes you both profoundly evil and profoundly sick. He's narcissistic, paranoid, antisocial, and sadistic. And that's one of the reasons that he picks fights with everybody. My goodness.
Okay, we're going to pull up the Goldwater rule now. I'm sorry, it is not an ambush, but you know about the Goldwater rule. The American Psychiatric Association says that you cannot actually, or it is unethical, for a psychiatrist to offer a professional opinion unless he or she has conducted an examination and has been granted proper authorization for such a statement. Now, I appreciate you're a psychologist, not a psychiatrist, but still, isn't it wise to keep your opinions like that to yourself until you've actually had a chat with the president yourself?
Not if it might save hundreds of millions of people from being killed. We have and also have an ethical duty to warn people who might be harmed by someone who has a mental illness. And in this case, hundreds of millions of people may die because this disturbed individual who has unilateral authority over a nuclear first strike may decide in a fit of pique or a fit of paranoia or a fit of sadistic rage that he wants to push the button.
Okay, now you've written a letter to the president's personal physician, and we have that here, and it's an open letter, everyone has seen it, and within it, you're actually saying your examination should include an evaluation of the 71-year-old president's neurological health, including cognitive and mental health functions. Now, we've had the Rear Admiral come out and say he's in physically good health and mentally fine. Well, do you accept that?
Well, he didn't do any psychological or psychiatric testing at all. He did do a cognitive screening, which we had actually recommended in our letter, and we're grateful for that. It shows that he does not have a case of frank dementia. But you have to understand that this is a screening test. So yes, he can recognize a camel. He can read letters off a page. He can recite 3 numbers backwards. He doesn't have gross dementia. That doesn't mean that he doesn't have pre-dementia. He's showing signs of organic decline.
Okay, we may come back to this issue a little bit later. Dr. John Gartner, thank you for that. I'm going to talk about another one of his fights now, and that's to do with racism. A lot of people call him racist. And here's his response, quite firmly.
No, I'm not a racist.
I am the least racist person you have ever interviewed. That I can tell you.
Mica, you know, perhaps of everyone here, you know, you've met him, you've campaigned for him. Do you think he says racist things?
Absolutely not. And Alveda King, who was Martin Luther King's niece, was on Fox News several times this past week, and she completely denounced these comments that he's racist. I must say the Democrats are desperate. Anytime they have nothing to show for a year in office in terms of the Senate and the Congress, they start playing identity politics and the race card. I must say that I think that news anchors and guests who have used the S word over and over need to put a quarter in the swear jar. It certainly is a distraction from Donald Trump's record.
Mica, what did you make of Dr. John Gartner's assessment of President Trump, a malignant narcissist?
I find it extremely disturbing. You know, there were 35 psychologists and mental health experts that sent a letter to the New York Times in February, and Susan Nelson, who is the president of the American Psychological Association, denounced that as not only a violation of the ethics code and the Goldwater rule, but also as a possible way of stigmatizing those individuals in the U.S. who have been legitimately diagnosed with a mental illness.
Okay. John Gizzi, do you think that he would lose the election if he were running today?
No, and I'll tell you why. Because even if you read today's New York Times, you'll find that the Democratic Party is moving increasingly to the left, which is where most Americans are increasingly not moving.
Well, we've taken a look at some of the fights that Trump's been having. Let's take a look and judge him by some of the most important campaign promises, things we heard over and over again.
Honestly, she should be locked up. It's time to drain the swamp in Washington, D.C. They're screaming, we want the wall, build the wall, Mr. Trump, and we're going to build the wall, don't worry about it.
Well, let's go to Mica Mosbacher. Mica, lock her up, drain the swamp, build a wall. There's no wall so far. Hillary's still free, and I don't know what the swamp's like. We'll probably ask you or John Gizzi to tell us what the lobbyists are like around Washington. So what's happened to those campaign promises then?
He will build a wall. There's several prototypes in process now. Obviously, he has made that one of 4 priorities in terms of putting a spending bill through Congress.
And drain the swamp?
In terms of Hillary Clinton, the reason, draining the swamp. First of all, he's challenging every institution and establishment in Washington, including the press. He is calling out the media when they show an obvious liberal bias and are not fair and balanced.
Okay, and Hillary Clinton?
So he is draining the swamp.
No one's going to lock her up.
I think the jury is still out on Hillary Clinton.
Mica, one thing you might appreciate, and that is the economy is showing quite strong signs of life, particularly the stock market. If we take a look at the graphic, we've got the Dow Jones up 30% over the period he's been president. The economy's growing around 3% over the last quarter. And of course, he got those wide-ranging tax reforms passed. That's a big deal in Washington, isn't it, Mica?
Absolutely. It puts us in great shape for the midterms. And if you look at it, the average family of 4 that earns $73,000 a year can expect a $2,000 tax break. And this is significant. Many American families live paycheck to paycheck, and they don't have an extra $100 for an emergency.
Mica, thanks for that. We've covered some of the battles with outsiders. Now we're going to look at the fights with his own staff. Here's where Trump easily beats all his predecessors.
He's fired!
When it comes to staff turnover in the first year, Trump is way ahead of the pack. 36% of Trump's staff have been fired, quit, or changed positions. That's more than twice as many as under Reagan, 3 times Clinton, 4 times Obama, 5 times Bush Sr., and 6 times George W. And we're not talking about junior positions here. These are senior White House staff. Michael Flynn, the National Security Advisor, was one of the first to go. Forced to resign over his conversations with the Russian ambassador to the United States before Trump became president.
I think it's very, very unfair what's happened to General Flynn, the way he was treated.
Flynn lasted just 23 days, and last month he pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI. Then came the summer of chaos, starting with Press Secretary Sean Spicer.
If the president puts Russian salad dressing on his salad tonight, somehow that's a Russian connection.
He resigned after strongly disagreeing with the appointment of Anthony Scaramucci as communications director. Sean Spicy Spicer lasted just 6 months. A week later, out went Chief of Staff Reince Priebus, before anyone could really learn how to pronounce his name.
Ladies and gentlemen, the next president of the United States, Donald Trump!
Priebus just couldn't control the divided White House and was also against the appointment of Scaramucci. But the mooch himself didn't last long.
But I don't have any friction with Sean. I don't have any friction with Reince.
In a rant to the New Yorker magazine, the mooch called Priebus a paranoid schizophrenic and used obscene language about the chief strategist, Steve Bannon. The brash Wall Street warrior, who'd known Trump for years, lasted just 10 days. But Bannon, the man the mooch had insulted, was also living on borrowed time, and a month later, he too would be gone.
I like Mr. Bannon. He's a friend of mine.
But he never got along with Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and was drawing a lot of heat from the public and press for being too right-wing. The self-described outsider predicted he'd only last 8 months. He lasted 7. Out of that cozy little group in the White House, just one man, the vice president, remains. Outside of the White House, one man deserves a mention above all others: the FBI director, James Comey. At first, Trump seemed to love him.
He's become more famous than me.
But love turned to suspicion as Comey led an investigation into alleged ties between the Trump campaign and Russia. Comey was fired for reasons ranging from the Clinton email investigation to alleged showboating. He's only the second FBI director ever to be fired and lasted less than 4 months under Trump, who made a veiled threat about having tapes of their conversations.
I've seen the tweet about tapes. Lordy, I hope they're tapes.
Well, let's go to John Gizzi now. You've been watching presidents in the United States for decades. Why does this president shake things up so much? Is he trying to run the White House like he ran his business?
Oh, I think he definitely is, and he is now encountering a learning curve. This is what happens with on-the-job training. Remember something. This is the first president of the United States who has held neither elective nor appointive office in government. But that's what people wanted. Someone who did not know the territory.
Well, thanks for that, John. Of course, Donald Trump's shaking things up. So too is this book, Michael Wolff's book, Fire and Fury. Published a couple of weeks ago, it contains many anecdotes from people who work in the White House. And as you imagine, it's got all the journalists, politicians and satirists very excited.
The president is said to be furious about a sensational new book about him and his family.
Furious, disgusted would probably certainly fit.
It reads like an angry, vindictive person spouting off.
This book is loaded with the dish.
I consider it a work of fiction.
They're calling it fake. They're saying it's gossip. Is it gossip? Is it journalism? What is it, Michael?
It's what I saw and what I heard.
He said he interviewed me for 3 hours in the White House. It didn't exist, okay? It's in his imagination.
I absolutely spoke to the president. Whether he realized it was an interview or not, I don't know, but it certainly was not off the record.
Donald Trump didn't want to be president.
He didn't want to win necessarily, he just wanted to make more money.
If you guys know anything, you know that Donald Trump is a winner, and he's not going to do something for the purpose of not coming out on top.
Melania was in tears and not of joy.
The idea that she was crying is nonsense.
Donald and Melania's bedroom habits.
For example, Trump's rules, no one touched his toothbrush. He liked McDonald's because it was pre-made and he knew he couldn't be poisoned.
Serious? Is that news? Somebody's
toothbrushing?
Let's talk about your toothbrushing. How do you brush your teeth?
It describes Ivanka Trump as having her own presidential ambitions. If the opportunity arose, she'd be the one to run for president.
If she's qualified to be president, so am I.
According to your reporting, everyone around the president questions his intelligence.
100% of the people around him, they all say he is like a child.
Remember that meeting in Trump Tower between Jared Manafort, Don Jr., and a Russian lawyer?
Even if you thought that this was not treasonous, you should have called the FBI immediately.
Going after the president's son in an absolutely outrageous and unprecedented way is probably not the best way to curry favor with anybody.
Sloppy Steve brought him into the White House quite a bit, and it was one of those things. That's why Sloppy Steve is now looking for a job.
Well, Sloppy Steve, another little nickname to put down the people he was close to once upon a time. John Gartner, will come back to you in just a moment to ask you about these claims that he's like a child. But first, John Gizzi, what is this reputation? What is the reputation of Michael Wolff? He's a contemporary of yours. He's a journalist. He knows Washington well. What's his reputation?
Michael Wolff is someone who has developed a reputation almost overnight. You've heard the phrase late bloomer. Well, I believe that Mr. Wolff has been around for a while. Is he a distinguished and known journalist in any way? Not really. I mean, if you compare him to some of the correspondents who've been around for a while, Jake Tapper on CNN, for example, it is just no comparison, because he's just not that well known. The book made him known, and I guarantee you, whenever you hear references to Michael Wolff in the coming months and years, it will always be not Michael Wolff, the veteran journalist, Michael Wolff, author of Fire and Fury.
Fair enough. Let's take a look at those claims that the president acts like a child with Dr. John Gartner now. What do you make of those claims and others within the book? Do they worry you?
Well, a great deal. And, you know, you pointed out that we've been criticized for diagnosing the president from a distance. But one of the valid ways of forming a diagnosis is speaking to people who know the subject well, who interact with them on a daily basis. And we are getting widespread leaks in the book Fire and Fury, but also in other articles like the Vanity Fair article, that the staff within the White House who work with him on a daily basis are extremely concerned about his cognitive and mental health, that they talk about the 25th Amendment on a daily basis, that they think he's like a child, that they think he's not intelligent, that he can't read, that he can't listen, that he can't comprehend what people are saying, that he is losing a step, that he is becoming unraveled, that he is, these are all direct quotes from people who are on his side.
Fair enough. John Gartner, you mentioned Article 25 there. Now, that's the provision for the Vice President and the Cabinet, or the Vice President and Congress, to remove the President if they think he's unfit to carry out his duties. Do you think that that could happen?
I don't think it will happen, because we have the most maybe corrupt Republican Party in the history of the United States. I think they would prop him up if he were a dead body, like the movie My Weekend at Bernie's.
Oh my goodness, you are getting Mica Mosbacher's heart rate up. She is furious. Mica, the most corrupt Republican Party in history. I've got to give you the comeback on that one.
I am furious. So you're fired, John. And might win the fake news award.
And he's not even a journalist.
I would say that I have been a long-standing member of the Republican Party, and it's interesting that Donald Trump carried 10 previously Democratic states. So we're actually now morphing into a more centrist type party, while the Democrats, as you so aptly pointed out earlier, are moving farther and farther left. I think that this impeachment nonsense is just absolutely desperate rhetoric. It's a way to smear the president by the Democrats, who again have nothing to show for an accomplishment in this past year.
Mica, thank you for that. We're just going to quickly go back to Dr. John Gartner. A final thought, Dr. Gartner. What do you make of Mica's assessment there of what's happening with the Mueller investigation?
It's really sad that we are living in a post-truth universe since Donald Trump became president. This is the greatest scandal in American history, and to say that the investigation has gone on too long, it's not gone on as long as past investigations, and we've already indicted the National Security Director, the campaign manager. We have 2 senior people who have pled guilty. We are going to discover that Donald Trump has been involved with the Russian mob for 30 years. He's been laundering money for them through his real estate empire. He colluded with them during the election. That's why he won, because the Russians intervened in the election. And he has committed obstruction of justice in plain sight. He is a traitor, and he is a Russian puppet. And this is the greatest scandal in American history, maybe that will ever happen in our history.
Dr. John Gartner, we're going to give one more word and response to John Gizzi, please. Some of those are very strong accusations, which obviously Dr. Gartner believes. What do you make of those?
Oh, my gosh. You know something? I think when I retire, I'm going to write a book totally of conspiracies and put out my own list of the 10 most bizarre and outlandish conspiracies. That certainly would be on the list.
Well, we'll give John Gizzi the last word there. John Gizzi in Washington, thank you. Mica, also in Washington, thanks for joining us again here at the Nexus. And Dr. John Gartner, thank you for your professional opinion there. Well, if he does survive for 3 more years, he may have to face Oprah at the ballot box. She is up next here in the Nexus. Thank you for watching. See you then.